But we're continuing on this sermon series based on the book, The Art of Neighboring. We've been introducing this idea of neighboring really for the whole last year, and it's kind of culminating here in this series as we approach the season of Advent, a time when people enjoy coming to church more frequently. So we want to be prepared to be the best neighbors we can be, invite our friends, invite our family, embrace this whole identity of neighboring. So we're going to be continuing in that this week, but this week we're going to be talking about one of the biggest obstacles in our life when it comes to being better neighbors. This obstacle is time. We live super busy lives that we pack in with work and family and hobbies and even our church activities. This idea of even adding one more thing to an overflowing schedule just seems overwhelming. Pastor Gary, you really want me to meet and get to know and spend time with another person in my life? See, I think the problem isn't necessarily the hours that we have available to us in a day. The bigger question is, are we living at a pace that doesn't allow us to be available to people around us? Are we living in such a way that we're no longer able to just experience life that is around us? We're under a lot of pressure culturally to be busy. In fact, if we're not busy, some might call us lazy or unproductive and just kind of challenge us and question if we're even trying. But this whole sermon kind of brought one passage to mind as I was preparing for it, Proverbs 3:5-6, which says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your path straight." Even though we live in a culture that's obsessed with busyness and consumption, God's word presents to us a different focus, a different place to put our attention. We're going to address this tension between time and relationship by looking at one of the most famous stories in the Bible of Mary and Martha. We're going to discover how Jesus calls us to live at a pace that creates margin, a pace that allows us to be present with others and to build the relationship that he desires for us. See, the reality is where we are in our span of time and history, you'd think that we would have all the free time in the world. Our entire lives are inundated with technology. We have smartphones, we have automation, and we have all these tools that should make our life more convenient. We've had more free time than ever if we embrace technology and allowed it to create margin in our lives. But the opposite has become true. Instead of creating margin, we cram more and more and more into our days. We stay connected to the outside world 24/7. Most of us are constantly multitasking with music in one ear and listening to the TV in the other and doing something on our computer in front of our face. We always believe that we can squeeze just a little bit more out of every day. This frantic pace makes it so difficult to slow down enough to engage with the people around us, including our neighbors. If you're anything like me and someone says, "Hey, how's it going?" the first thing that comes to your mind is busy. I'm busy. I'm running around all the time. But is that the right way to live? I think there's three myths that we often believe that keeps us living within this busyness and without the margin that we need in life. The first one is that someday this will settle down. How many times have you caught yourself saying that? If I just get through this one thing, next week's going to be way easier. I'll get way more rest. We just need to end this project. I just need to complete this one task. I just need to make it through Christmas. Whatever it is, we always have this idea that on the other side, the grass on the other side's greener, right? The reality is that never really happens. And if we don't change our priorities now, we're never going to find it in the future. It's something we have to work towards. Myth number two is more will be enough. Once I make X amount of dollars a year, I'll be happy. Once I have this one thing, I'll be happy. There's always this idea that more will be enough. But the reality is that we've learned more possessions, more success, more experiences. They lead us to wanting more. It's never enough unless we tell ourselves we have enough. We will always still wanting more with this endless pursuit of more, keeping us striving and leaving no space for what truly matters. We have to say, this is enough right now. And the third myth is everyone lives like this. It's so easy to believe that everyone in the world lives just as busy as we are, and that this frenetic pace is just the way that life is. But not everyone lives this way. In fact, there are a lot of people who've learned to slow down, prioritize relationships, and create meaningful connections with their neighbors. It is possible to live differently, but it requires intentionality. These myths keep us stuck in this cycle of busyness, preventing us from living at a pace that makes room for the people of God that He has placed around us. So, how do we break free? How do we break out of this cycle of busyness? Well, here's where I think that we can learn a lot from the Gospel of Luke in the story of Mary and Martha. We're going to be reading this morning from Luke chapter 10, verses 38 through 42. And it reads, as Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. She had a sister called Mary who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. She came to him and asked, Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me. Martha, Martha, the Lord answered. You're worried and upset about many things, but few things are actually needed, or indeed only one. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her. See, here we have this story of two sisters, Mary and Martha, who had the privilege of hosting Jesus in their home. And as the story went, Martha is running around, frantic, distracted by all the preparations that need to be made. And Mary, we see her just sitting at the feet of Jesus, listening to his teaching. Martha, overwhelmed by her tasks, she approaches Jesus and yells, Lord, don't you care that she's not helping me? I'm doing all the work here. Don't you care about that? And he just simply says, Martha, you're worrying about too much stuff. You're focusing on all the wrong things. See, your sister has found the one true thing that is necessary. You're distracted. You're allowing it all to happen. At first glance, it kind of feels like Jesus might be reprimanding or yelling at Martha for serving him, which seems strange because isn't that a good thing? But Jesus isn't saying that serving is bad. He's teaching Martha and us in this story that sometimes we have to say no to a good thing in order to focus on the main thing, on Jesus, on relationship. We have come to a place, we have to come to a place of being compelled not to just do things for Jesus, but to long for a true and real relationship with him. Martha was doing what was culturally accepted, expected even. In that time, women are expected to prepare and serve meals when they host guests. Mary was doing sitting at the feet of Jesus like a disciple that was culturally unheard of. Women don't learn from the rabbis. They're not disciples. They don't get taught like that. But she chose to sit there, and Jesus affirms her choice to prioritize being with him over fulfilling cultural expectations. Did you hear that? Jesus affirms her decision to be with him rather than fulfilling cultural expectations. The lesson here is clear. Like Mary and Martha, we're often caught up in the busyness of life, doing good things, but missing out on the most important thing, time with Jesus, and time to build the relationships that he's calling us to build. Sometimes, to be effective neighbors, we have to go against the cultural norms of busyness, and we have to create space for what really, truly matters. So how do we create that space? How do we free up time to be present with our neighbors when our schedules are already packed out? The answer is found in what the book calls the art of elimination. It talks about Michelangelo. And when he's asked how he created his masterpiece statue of David, he simply said, I removed everything that wasn't David. I chipped away at all the non David parts of the rock. In the same way, we need to remove everything from our lives that isn't helping us focus on what God is calling us to do. Jesus modeled this beautifully through the Gospels. We see him taking time away from the crowds, and he retreats to be alone with the Father. He retreats to be alone with the disciples and to pour into them. People wanted more of Jesus. They wanted more healings. They wanted more teachings, which are all good things that Jesus provided. But Jesus knew when to step away. He practiced healthy rhythms of work and rest. And in the story of Mary and Martha, Jesus invites Martha to do the same, to step away from the busyness of serving and sit at his feet to focus on the main thing. For us, this may mean saying no to activities and commitments, even if they are good things, to make room for what is even better. It may simply mean simplifying our schedules, letting go of unnecessary obligations, and intentionally creating margin in our lives. When we do this, we free up time to be present with God and with others, especially our neighbors. So let's get practical. Here are some ways that we can begin practicing this art of elimination in our lives. The first thing to do is evaluate your commitments. Take a look at your calendar. What activities are filling your time? Are there things that you can eliminate to scale back to create more margin for relationships? Do you have a schedule of the things in your life? If not, maybe sit down and put it on paper and begin to realize maybe where your priorities are. Another thing that we should do is set boundaries with technology. Set boundaries with technology. Technology can be one of the biggest distractions in our lives. We have to set boundaries about how much time we spend on our phone, how much time we spend on social media, how much time we spend watching football, how much time we spend watching Netflix, how much time we spend on TikTok. We need to use that time instead to engage with our neighbors. We need to actually schedule time for neighboring. If there's something you want to do, you need to put it in your schedule. It's not going to happen by itself if we're not intentional. Just like you schedule meetings and appointments, you need to schedule time to connect with your neighbors. This could be as simple as having a meal with them or going on a walk with them, walk your dog with your neighbor, whatever it takes, schedule it. Another thing that I always encourage is to be interruptible. Our busy schedules lead us to overlook all these little opportunities that land right in our lap to connect with people. So instead of being constantly task driven, the author of our books, the author of this book challenges us to slow down and to leave room for God ordained interruptions. They draw on the example of Jesus, noting how he regularly interrupted himself with crowds and individuals in need, and even by unexpected circumstances. Jesus didn't see interruptions as inconveniences, rather, he viewed them as opportunities to demonstrate love and compassion. The author encourages us to embrace interruptions as divine appointments that can help us build genuine relationships with those around us. And the last thing that I encourage you to do to learn how to get rid of the busyness of life is learn how to practice Sabbath. See, God designed us to work from a place of rest, not work until our body absolutely collapses on the bed and we have no other option but to rest, but that we should work from a place of rest so that we can put forth our best effort. Practicing Sabbath, a day of rest each week, can help us reset and focus on what matters most, including building relationships with those around us and being better neighbors. See, as we consider what it means to eliminate distractions and focus on the main thing, we must also remember that it isn't something we do in our own strength. God has shown us the way. His love, his reckless love chased after us. It broke down barriers and tore through distractions just to reach us. He gave up so much so that we could be in relationship with him. Perhaps today God is calling you to let go of something that is keeping you from prioritizing the main thing, whether that's your relationship with him or creating relationships with people around you. What are you holding on to that needs to be released so that you can follow his example of love? I hope that this sermon challenges you, but it also encourages you and leads you to question, am I focused on the main thing, or am I allowing these cultural expectations of busyness and frenetic, wild rushing around? Or am I accepting this pace of Jesus to be loving, to be neighborly, to be focused on the main thing? So this week I pray that you will assess your schedule, that you will evaluate the things that fill your time, and that you will begin to eliminate the things that are holding you back from the main thing. I hope you have a wonderful week and that this sermon really challenges you. We'll see you next time.